Roll. You know, gentlemen, it's 3 p.m. by Phil's watch. Do you know what that means?
Yes.
Absolutely nothing.
It means we're back in business.
It means it's whiskey somewhere. Is this one of those glam rock bands from the 80s?
Oh, dude, you don't know who this is?
It's Poison.
Oh, is it?
Poison!
Stop. Come on, it's the crew, man.
Thank you, Chubb.
If it's not Round and Round by Rad, I don't know it.
No, I wasn't naming the name of the band.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, assholes, for ruining that intro. Do you know how long it took me to cut that so it went from the beginning to the end perfectly?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to do it again?
No, it's fine. It's fine. The moment's passed. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Squatchable Podcast, where we have, completely abandoned the subject of Bigfoot and moved on to other things for the time being. I am your host, Richard James Allen, joining me as always from the swamps of Louisiana, where them boys do ride them cat. Forget it. Chubb.
Yeah, that's worse. That's so bad.
Greetings to everyone.
You know what? I tried. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Joining me from Tennessee, Nikki.
Hey.
And from Ireland, Kevin.
It's Brittany, bitch.
Oh, dear Christ. And from Washington State, Power Breakdown.
Right there.
And if you enjoy Power Breakdown, Nikki, Kevin, or Chubb, you may enjoy the badly drawn misadventures of two Bigfoot. Head on over to Bigfoot with Keith and Colin, where this week we will finish up the 12 days of Christmas and enjoy, just the lads relaxing, as is their wont. Without further ado, I already said who I am. Let's just get on with it. Tonight we're going to talk about the Donner Party and Dr. Death. I will be taking the lead this week. So the Donner Party, it's not true crime. It's not a mystery. We know what happened. It's just an interesting story about what happened to 89 survivors. Well, not survivors, 89 pioneers, I guess you'd call them, in their quest to reach California. Which was, this was back in the 1800s when traveling the Oregon Trail, or the nation's longest graveyard, as it was affectionately referred to, was kind of a big deal. These days, you can get in a car, get on the old interstates, and be in California in 16 hours or so. Well, depending on where you start from, obviously. That might have been an easily assumed guess. But the point is, it's not as hard as it once was to get to California.
Want to bet? Well, it's harder to get out. Actually.
Well, no, you're going for the thing of, do you want to go to California?
Well, yeah, that's where.
Yeah, right, because I think back in the day, people liked it. But maybe not so much now.
49ers, maybe. Not the ball team.
Let him finish, for fuck's sake.
All right.
Okay.
The year was 1846. Some 400 pioneers decided that they were going to travel west to California in a long wagon trail. They started pretty late, in early, late March, and decided to, this was a bad time to start because, of course, in those days it took a few months, and they did not want to get trapped in the Sierra Mountains by snow. So they started off. They got to Wyoming. Everything was fine. Long ass wagon trail. People are having a laugh. Everything seems to be going okay. 89 people decided, you know what? We're not going to follow the regular route. We're going to take the Hastings Cutoff. Now, the Hastings Cutoff was a shortcut designed by a man by the name of Landstrom Hastings. And all you need to know about Landstrom Hastings is he fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. Boo, they were the bad guys. Bill. And he died in South America trying to find a colony in Brazil to establish 4 ex-Confederates. So that gives you the measure of the man. He was also the kind of bloke that spends a week outdoors and thinks, that's it, I'm a mountain man now. I know everything there is to know about living in the outdoors. And he wrote a pamphlet, and this pamphlet was concerning a shortcut from Wyoming to California. It was to shave off a good 300 miles of the trip. It was going to be like the mecca of the route to California. So, this wagon trail of 400 people, they get to Wyoming, and 89 people go, you know what? We're going to listen to this bloke, Landstrom Hastings. We're going to take the cutoff, and we're going to head to California our own way. The rest of the wagon trail thought they were mad and carried on the usual trek. Landstrom Hastings joined them for a short time, but he would turn back eventually. Because, of course, it didn't work. They followed the route. The shortest distance between 2 places is a straight line. They followed this line. There wasn't a road, so they had to make their own road. There wasn't decent land to graze their cattle, so they had to go and forage food. It was a bad idea. Now, the route was supposed to save them 300 miles.
Yes.
Chokes. How many miles did it actually save them?
From what I remember from checking up on this, like the average traveler in that time could go 15 miles a day, but this party only went about a mile a day, I think.
That wasn't a question, but yeah, that's a good point to make. Kevin, how many miles did it save the group?
Absolutely none.
Okay. Phil?
Well, actually, I think they lost because of the up and down.
Okay. Nikki?
I already know the answer to this.
You do know the answer.
She's the expert.
I do know the answer to this. They actually lost close to 100 miles.
Yeah.
They lost
It was-
137 miles.
There you go.
So, obviously, that's not what you want. So they get past the Hastings Cutoff and they end up rejoining the regular trail towards California. End up in the Utah. Oh, what's it called? The desert they got in Utah.
The 40-mile desert.
Yeah, they got them. They ended up there, and obviously
That's in Nevada.
I thought it was in Utah.
No, that was the cutoff. Was Salt Lake cutoff was Hastings cutoff.
Yeah, so they end up in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
They've run out of food at this point. Things are getting a little bit tense in the group. The leader of the wagons of these 89 people is a man by the name of James Reed. For whatever reason, don't know why. I guess he was feeling a little pent up. He decides to stab somebody else to death.
Oh, actually, I know why, if you want to know.
Oh, why did he do this?
One of the wagon drivers, I say drivers, but one of the men leading the wagons was beating his ox too hard. And Reed didn't like the cruelty. And when he wouldn't stop, he stabbed him. And then they exiled Reed. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was the next question. Did you think they were going to do with Reed? But whatever. Chubb says they exiled Reed. They kicked him out of the group and he rode ahead. He left some messages for his family who was still with the main group, which I thought was kind of sweet, but he made it to California okay. So now there's 88 of these people. They reached the foot of the Sierra Mountains. and they see that there's snow on the peaks. Some people might say, okay, you've missed your chance. Maybe it's time to just bunker down in the lower elevations where all the game are, and just, it's not the best situation, but surely you won't go up there if there's snow up there already. They went up there. They went up there into the Sierra Mountains when it was snowing. Now, to be fair to them, this is one of the worst snowstorms ever recorded in the Sierra Madre Mountains. Is it Sierra Madre? Or is
No,
it
Sierra Nevada mountains.
Sierra Nevada mountains. Which it was an unprecedented storm, which isn't on them. But still, you'd stay at lower elevation, surely. Anyway, so they end up in the mountains and they end up snowed in next to a lake. At the time, it was called Tucker Lake. Now it's called Donna Lake, which tells you how well this is going. So they end up there. They end up making this makeshift camp. Interesting point. When I heard about this through a show called Puppet History, it was an episode of theirs, and the story hooked me, and I went down this rabbit hole, and I've had to condense it slightly because I've only got like half an hour to talk about this, so I don't go into Nikki's time. So I'm condensing the story a lot, and I'm leaving room for everyone to talk about it. But this story just hooked me for whatever reason. I went down this complete rabbit hole with it, and archaeologists actually struggled initially to find the location of the makeshift camp of which the Donner Party spent most of the winter, because this whole thing, they got stuck there, and they sent out a search party which is called the Forlorn Hope Party, and the Forlorn Hope Party is actually the party that reverted to cannibalism before the rest of the Donner Party. That's an interesting fact, that the people they sent out first started cannibalizing before the rest of them did. But the whole rescue process of going back to the camp and coming back took 3 trips and about 3 months to accomplish, which, kind of sad. One rescuer single-handedly led 9 survivors out of the mountains. John Stark, he wasn't even part of the group. When the Forlorn Hope Party eventually made it to California, they found a prospectors camp, a pioneers camp, and they were like, hey, listen, these dudes, they need our help. And this John Stark bloke, he went out there, and he, in the third party, and he led 9 survivors out of there, which I thought was pretty cool. And another interesting fact about the whole thing, not all of the people involved in the Donner Party thing engaged in cannibalism. Some of the survivors managed to survive without eating any human flesh, which I thought was really cool.
But they were still accused.
Well, they weren't so much accused as, people went, well, shit happens. I mean, that's the really cool thing about this, or interesting thing, is when, the survivors finally made it to California, the people there were like, well, it's not great, but you did what you had to do. Except for one of them, but I'm getting ahead of myself massively here. So, yeah, they ended up at Tucker Lake. They ended up bunking down. They sent out a party, the Forlorn Hope Party, with 2 Indians named Salvador and Luis. They trekked out towards California. They ran out of food. They ran out of anything. So one of the members of the Forlorn Hope Party died. The other 8 members decided to eat them. The Native Americans were like, yeah, we don't want no part of this. So they just left. And the person leading the Forlorn Hope Party was a man named William Foster. He hunted them down and he shot them, and they ate them as well. And the interesting thing is, horrific thing is, the Forlorn Hope Party ended up at the Native Americans' tribe. I assume they didn't tell them everything that happened. But yeah, the Forlorn Hope Party eventually made it to the pioneers' camp. in California, and over the course of 3 months, the rest of the survivors were rescued. Out of 89 people, 45 people managed to walk out alive. The Donner Party completely died. There were no survivors. Interesting fact, William Keysburg, the main cannibal of the group, I guess you'd call him because he ate the most people, ended up making his fortune in a gold rush and opening a restaurant.
I see. Was he also a barber?
It's a cautionary tale, and it reminds Americans that immigrating wasn't always easy.
There's a restaurant on Fleet Street.
It's still not
Nice.
easy.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, as a matter of fact, I'll say that as an anecdote, I think about 50% of the people who come from Europe actually just go back. I mean, that's true for to this day. But I've been to this location in California. Okay, don't say anything about that.
Don't ruin the wrap up for it. Okay. Yeah. That's how I'm gonna. I know what you're gonna say, and that's how I'm gonna wrap up this up.
Okay? Oh, okay, all right. So I won't say that, but I was just gonna say, it's not that far. If you go to Reno, Nevada, it's just clearly just right on the other side of that. Washoe County goes north and south there, and then if you go to the right, down towards the bottom, that's where you get to Nevada County. Nevada County is actually where it's at. And so, well, I don't know what I can't say, but I don't think it's that far away otherwise to where the Sierra Sounds were recorded either. How do you like that?
I think I've condensed it too much.
But it was one of those things where obviously this was a tale of woe that you get into that. I mean, you can talk about a lot of different things with how cannibalism affects people. There's always stories like the Argentinian rugby team that got stuck up in the mountains, and this happens all the time in like bush country up in.
I don't have a problem with cannibalism.
But a lot of people do. I mean,
why? I mean, it's a free source.
Well, I don't. I mean, cannibalism through my understanding of. I mean, I was raised a Christian, but I don't practice it now per se, not in a
for obvious reasons.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know what that would mean, Phil, but I'm just saying that cannibalism is one of those things where it's sort of one of those mortal sins. The Christian world, it's sort of like suicide. You can't do either. Like you'd be better off dying than you would be to, try to take.
But as long as you use the proper sauce, it's not so bad.
That's right. Right. And so, but I'm just thinking from that standpoint, it was one of those things where, these stories of these people who get stuck up there. I mean, that's just commonplace. I don't quite know. Maybe it's just the number of people that were stuck there and the fact that there was women and children and all that with them, that became such a much more
cautionary tale.
Yeah,
because they didn't follow the route. Every other member of that 300 of that wagon train made it to California safety.
right.
The only people that suffered were the people in the Donner Party that followed this ludicrous shortcut, which mountain men were telling them, don't take this route. It's,
right.
Yeah, the guys with the other train was basically warning them against it because it was untried. Even the con man Hastings, he never tried it either. I mean, it was a complete invention.
But he did.
Guy's mind.
He did try because he went with the Donner Party.
Yeah, but I mean, prior to this time, it was never a tested trail.
Yeah.
Well, no, he was just like the bloke Nicky's going to talk about. He was just a dude, that thought he knew everything. Basically.
Yeah. Well, once you fall for a guy, once you fall for a guy who thinks he knows everything, and he can convince you that he knows everything. I mean, how many stories in history do we have of that? But a lot of people don't realize too that okay, so they think, oh, it's up in the mountains. There's going to be trees. There's going to be this and that. There's all kinds of different things up there. It's actually that upper upland up there. There's virtually nothing that lives up there. A lot of people don't realize that. You're going to get miscellaneous, maybe mountain goats and mountain sheep, and that's about it. Very, very, but it's so
not in the middle of winter.
Yeah. And even the natives in that area wouldn't go up to that because it's cold up there pretty much all the time. There's a tree that's not far from there called Methuselah, which was thought to be the world's oldest living tree. And, but the natives didn't even go up there because they if they did, they'd go up there for maybe a week or 3 weeks or a month at the most, but they wouldn't live up there other than in the summertime because it was so freezing cold. And so I mean, to be cold, wet, tired, and hungry is terrible. But then again, in the Oregon Trail in itself, like you said, was terrible to go on. I mean, there was people dropping left, right, and center. I mean, people getting cholera, people getting all kinds of disease.
Well, that was part and parcel with just heading west in the first place.
Yeah,
you have to look at. I mean, if you're heading out in that direction, you have to do anything you can to survive by any means possible. And I think that's kind of where Mr. Hastings was coming from. Came up with the pamphlet. I mean, you got to make a living, But yeah, he was a con man, and I think it was a little bit. Why in the hell would these two brothers were so gullible to believe this guy, especially when they had experts saying don't take it, and they chose to believe this guy.
Well, if on a party, but actually James Reed was in charge of their wagons,
right
at that point.
I think
his family got out okay.
Yeah, but I think that what happened and I think that one of the reasons that we can't understand the way they acted was because of the fact that they literally, I mean, on the road, I mean, it wasn't like there was, motorway services. I mean, you basically left St. Louis or wherever you came from with the amount of food that you were going to need to get across that area. So, to cross that distance in that certain amount of time. So if you lost time, there was no area to make that up at. There were small mining towns, I would imagine, around there, but like Virginia City and those places, but that might have actually happened after.
That was after.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't even know where you would get supplies, even if you
there really wasn't any other than the forts. The forts had the supplies.
Yeah.
You made it to Fort Bragg or whatever. And that's where they should have stayed. If they were far too late, they should have stayed there.
Mm. It's a shame because, if they'd just saved 2 or 3 days, they would have got across the Sierra Nevada mountains perfectly. But, taking that cut off, leaving as late as they did, they doomed themselves from the start, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the whole cannibalism thing goes, I don't think less of them for that. They did what they had to do, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, people still make up stories. People still say that if they I mean, and I don't know. I mean, because of the Bigfoot thing, I still read people that say that the Donner Party the Donner Party was stalked by Bigfoot. I don't know where they get that inference from, but people say that. I've heard that before. People have said, "Oh, it was Bigfoot that was stalking them," up the mines and that. I mean, I don't know. Has anybody else heard that?
No.
First time for me.
Oh, really?
Okay. I think that's incredibly disrespectful, if I'm honest.
Oh, I agree with you, but I mean, it just seems like in that sort of a thing where we like to sort of rewrite history, around Bigfoot. You know, this is one of those things where you have to. I mean, I always look at it from the standpoint of that's what I do. I look at mythology and try to bring it to the forefront. But that's maybe why I heard it. You know, one of the weird ideas about Bigfoot and everything like that. Well, but I've definitely heard that, and it's before. So maybe if somebody knows, Steven's probably, if he listened, then he can probably write down where he's heard that before.
Hey, Nikki. Hey, Nikki.
Yes, sir.
What do you know about the Donner Party?
A lot. Why?
I'd like to hear it from your perspective. What are your thoughts? I'm not the host, but I
my thoughts on the Donner Party. I'm kind of on what part. I think that they were stupid for not taking advice. Obviously, they did have people who knew what they were talking about saying this guy is an idiot. He's never taken this trail. There's no way that he knows that this is a good trail, and they didn't listen. As far as them eating each other, I'm of the same thoughts as Richard. If you were in a survival situation and one of your comrades goes down, you eat them. They are now a resource. Use it.
Survival 101 by Nikki Slick.
Hey, I went out when I lived in on St. Simons, Georgia, or on St. Simons in Georgia. Went out on a boat with a friend, and we were like, you could still see the shore. We weren't even a mile away, and her boat broke down, and I was like, none of y'all better fall asleep. Just, I could have swam to shore, but you better not fall asleep. Exactly.
So
me's just gonna go to waste.
So the Donner Party, along with other parties, left in was it late April or was it May? Wasn't it?
It was mid to late April. I don't have an exact date. Mid to late April.
Actually, mid to late April was the time that most of them would have gone to avoid the winter.
It was the last wagon train of the season.
I think it was the one that left in the first or second week of May, and that would have been the last one, I think.
Yeah,
it was late. Mid to late April was the premium time to leave, because that way they ensured that the spring grasses would grow on the plains for their ox and whatever to eat. But yeah, you get past that point, and there was a very slim window. It was like 2 or 3 weeks right in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, leaving in, here it is right here, May 12th. May 12th. So yeah, so that's.
I watched 3 documentaries on this, and they all said mid to late April.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
There you go.
Wow. Yeah, this is history. I'm not going to name the channel.
It's that history place.
That history one.
That channel that you watch if you want to know about history.
Yeah, and if it's
after want to name it, we're unmonetized. We can do whatever we want.
So I was looking at the trail that they took, and if you look in satellite, it's still there, and it's still called the Hastings Cutoff. And they turned part of it into a road, an official roadway. And
I just want to know why they kept on going. They could have turned around once they went, oh, we have to build our own road.
At that point, isn't it? They're doubling down. They're like, well,
that's some crap that I would do. I mean, I can't even blame them for it because I'm one of those people that's like, I laid in this bed.
The actual documentary about this, the official one from that channel you were talking about, is called One More Mountain. And that's pretty much the logic there. They're just like, oh, it's just over the hill here.
And they got stranded. They got stranded like 50 miles outside of where they were supposed to be. Some stupid crap like that.
Less than 100 miles, yeah.
Yeah, there was there's some hills there that was probably 3 or 4 days travel. And you can see obviously it's going to be different these days, but there's timber there. So they would have had to start cutting trees. At that point, I would think, they would turn to Mr. Hastings and say, you're full of crap, And,
because he was still with them at this point.
Yeah.
He was with them for a good while, and then he turned around and was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go with the other."
You know, when the creator of the trail ditches you, you know.
Yeah, but like, I just don't understand the logic. Were they doubling down? What? But whatever.
I think it's easier to survive by yourself out there than it is with a group of people. So that's what Hastings figured out. You know what I mean?
If you're with a group of people, you just got to wait until they die, and then you've got like
you've got food for days.
That's what worked in the Royal Navy.
It's very true. I'm not even going to dispute that. Okay, before we hit the next story, number one, guess how America remembers this great tragedy? They've got a picnic spot at the place where the Donata Party made their camp. There's a picnic spot there. I'm just like, ooh.
I have a picture of it. I have a picture of it. It's the Donner Party picnic area.
Ew, that's a little close to the bone.
And it's in the National Forest, and there's a National Forest sign there, although they don't sell stickers.
And number two, our friend of the show, Matt Knapp, is starting his very own podcast. He's basically going to do the same thing we do. Talk about Bigfoot, talk about true crime, talk about ghosts, paranormal events, talk about stuff like that. It's called Planet Fear. He's just going to do it a lot better than we do, obviously.
The voice of Silk, the man with the voice.
He is Matt Knapp. He will do it infinitely better than we do. But yes, check out Planet Fear. The first episode is available on YouTube and Anchor, I believe. Matt Knapp, Bigfoot Crossroads. Man's a legend. Okay, moving on to our next story. Dr. Death. Nikki, talk to me.
All right, I'm going to read through this. I've kind of prepared something and stolen some stuff, and then we'll discuss it. This is actually local to me, and it's terrifying and also, I don't know, interesting as far as whether or not you think this person did it intentionally or not. So Christopher Daniel Dunch, he was born April the 3rd, 1971 in Montana, but he spent most of his youth in Memphis, Tennessee. He graduated in Cordova from a Christian school. And when he decided to go to college, he wanted to play college football. His friends say that he was often bragging about how good he was at football. He was the best that ever was. However, when it came to actually playing football, he was having a hard time even catching on to the simplest of things. He would just sit there for hours and hours and hours after practice and keep on practicing, but he could never make it in college football. So inevitably, he decided that he was going to go to school. He decided he was going to go to school for neurosurgery. So he completed his MD, PhD, and neurosurgery residence program at the University of Tennessee Health Center, and subsequently completed a spine fellowship program there as well. And what proved to be a foreshadowing of things to come, he was suspected of being under the influence of cocaine while operating during his 4th year of residency. And he was sent to an impaired physicians program and allowed to return to his residency program after. I'm going to come back to that later. So he begins operating in Texas in 2010 when he moved to Dallas to work at Baylor Plano. Early on, he had left a bad impression with his fellow surgeons. He came in, he was a big shot. He said he was the best neurosurgeon ever. He had all these credentials, said that, you know, the fellow surgeons that he had residenced under thought he was wonderful. And so he went in. However, several of Dunch's operations at Baylor Plano ended up with patients severely maimed, one including one of his best friends that he went to college with football. He ended up leaving him completely paralyzed. He also severed a major artery in a patient, Kelly Martin's spine, causing her to bleed to death. Soon after, Baylor forced his resignation. Dunch then moved to Dallas Medical System in Farmers Branch, where he was employed for less than a week before he was dismissed by administrators after the death of another patient and the maiming of another. He severed Brown's vertebral artery, which ultimately caused her to die from a stroke. And a day later, he severed one of another lady's nerve roots during spinal fusion surgery and left surgical hardware in her back muscles. Longtime spine surgeon Robert Henderson performed the salvage surgery on Eford, and likened Dunsh's work to her on her to play a child playing with Tinker toys on an erector set. Eford was left paralyzed as a result. Several co-workers with him spoke of him seeming to be drunk or under the influence. And one CST/first assistant, I'm guessing they didn't say if it was a nurse or not, but considering that this person watched him, thought he was under the influence, and then threw themselves over the patient's body and said, "You're not touching my patient anymore," I'm guessing it was a surgical tech or a first assist that did it, because they'd be the only ones that would be able to be that close and know what was going on. But they pretty much said, "You're not touching my patient anymore." Let's see. After leaving the Dallas Medical Center, Dunsh received a job at the outpatient clinic named Legacy Surgery Center. Meanwhile, Methodist Hospital in Dallas, where Dunsh had applied for a job, reported him to the National Practitioner Data Bank. And even after that, Dunsh was hired by a University General Hospital in Dallas in the spring of 2013. Soon afterwards, he severely maimed Jeff Glidewell after mistaking part of his neck muscle for a tumor, severing one of his vocal cords, cutting a hole in his esophagus, and slicing an artery and leaving a surgical sponge embedded in his throat. One of the CSTs or first assists or circulators saw this, and they were like, "Are we supposed to do that?" And he said, yeah, it's going to be okay. I'm the best that ever was. And it was just damaged. With the butt, he knows his stuff, apparently. So he was rushed in. This Dr. Kirby was rushed in to repair the damage, and later described what he found after opening Glidewell back up as the work of a crazed maniac. He later told Glidewell that it was clear Dunsh had tried to kill him. Glidewell was left with only one vocal cord and partially paralyzed on his left side. They find out later on that in December 2011, according to court proceedings, Dunsh had emailed a colleague saying, "I'm ready to leave the love and kindness and goodness and patience that I mix with everything else that I am and become a cold-blooded killer." He was drunk whenever he wrote this email, he states. I want to say that it was near Christmas or at a Christmas party that he had sent it. So Henderson and Kirby have been picking up after him. And these hospitals, even though they're firing him for maiming and killing patients, they're not actually going to the board and saying stuff. One of them, as you heard, went and put him in the National Practitioner Data Bank, but everybody's still hiring anyway. And usually they go to that to see if anything's going on. But they're still hiring him. So these two, Henderson and Kirby, are saying that the medical board's not doing anything about this guy, and he's able to just jump from place to place to place. So they start lobbying the medical board, and the Texas Medical Board finally suspended his license in 2013 and then revoked it on December the 6th of 2013, which had him moving to the Denver area. And he kind of went into a crazy fit. He got arrested for a DUI. He ended up being taken for a psych eval. He was arrested for shoplifting. But basically, these two men, the doctors that have been cleaning up after him in Texas, are the reason why he finally, they're like, the medical board's not doing anything. And this guy can just go to any other state he wants to and continue surgery. And they believe that he was doing it on purpose. So they lobbied, got his stuff taken away, but then they got a hold of the attorney general and other people, your DA and whatever, and had him, I think it's unprecedented. He's the first doctor who's ever went to jail and gotten charged for things that they did within surgery, because most of the time malpractice takes care of that, but he was actually charged and it has a life sentence because of these surgeries. It was like 33 botched surgeries. He killed several people, and he is serving a life sentence. And that was really short, but basically they had to prove that he was a cold-blooded killer and that he did it on purpose. And the real question is this guy has a history of having, I guess, delusions of grandeur. He's the best at whatever. Did he do it on purpose, or was he just really incompetent and thought he was great?
He was a sociopath.
He's a psychopath. I'm going to tell you. Okay, listen. I'm gonna speak in generalities here, but there's a psychiatrist that wrote a book called "Good Psychopaths," and he says that surgeons in general have psychopathic tendencies because otherwise they wouldn't take on the job. In other words, you have to have that level of sort of godliness or that sort of God.
There have been doctors that say, that say, I am God,
Yeah.
I have the man's life in my hands.
Yeah.
Right. But a neurosurgeon specifically, or a heart or thoracic surgeon, definitely has that, because they do have people's lives and deaths in the palm of their hand, and they can get away with it usually if they screw up. It wasn't necessarily. Do you think that I think that Dunch is the only person who's doing this as a surgeon? No. I think he's incompetent in being able to cover it up.
Well, I think that it's interesting that the guy's psychological makeup brings him from one point where he's the best football player of all times in college. He keeps trying at it. He says he's the best. He fails at it, and he comes away with that still thinking he was the best football player of all time. And naturally, if you're going to go into a field, why not neurosurgery?
Yeah.
Because it's like he did not learn from the first episode. He has to go into another one that's even worse.
And what's scary is the fact that he was able to graduate from UT Medical with less than 100 neurosurgeries under his belt. Most of the time, it's well over 1,000. And as a CST, I can tell you that I had to do at least 120 before I graduated, and I'm not even operating on somebody.
Yeah. Well, this is, part of the thing about it is that we live in a litigious society, so nobody's going to, doctors will, I'm not saying cover up for each other, but it's one of those things where if they have to admit that there's something wrong, if an administrator has to admit that their person did something wrong, then there's a problem. So it's almost,
it's not just a problem, it's a liability.
Yeah, right. And so,
and that's why they didn't go to the medical board. It's very much a boys' club when it comes to that. And that's why Henderson and the other gentleman, it was a big deal that they went after him so hard, because they don't do that. But these guys cared enough about what they were seeing. Like, he really honestly thought that he did a good job.
Right. But I think that's one of the things where, the protection of the system ends up being more important than catching somebody who's bad at it.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's no national board of standards, I would imagine. In these
there were some regulatory issues that came out of it, though. So there is that going on. It's not like they're just going to leave it at this, and this is the way it's going to be forever.
Right. But I'm just saying, say, for example, if I can get a teaching license, I have a teaching license in Washington. So that means I could teach in other states that have reciprocity. That's not necessarily true of all states, and because some have very low standards and some have very high standards. And so, and from that standpoint, you could see that in being a doctor as well, as far as, every individual. So in effect, he learned the system good enough to know that if you went from one state to another state and nobody said anything in the last state, that you could get away with it moving around.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, serial killers have learned that one a long time ago.
Right.
It's more like one hospital to another. Like I found out that the doctor that did my surgery that I had on the 6th, you know, he lost his credentials at one of the hospitals because he was stroking out patients. And
Nice.
there's no way of knowing that. I found that out this past week, you know, talking to other people. Because the hospital community is super small. And that's the thing is when it's that small of a community, you know that they heard. They were able to look at the national board and see that. But he talked such a good game. And he was so charming that he was able to just get right into the next place.
Oh, well, he was the best. So
yeah.
Right. And I'm just, you know, because I'm a lay person here, stroking out patients sounds worse than it
no.
No, he was putting them in reverse Trendelenburg, and they were having strokes while under the knife.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't naughty night nurse time.
Right, which I don't know if I can.
It could be. We're doing other things now on the show. So.
Yeah, we could have a discussion about that, but it's perfectly normal to put someone in reverse Trendelenburg whenever you're doing a surgery like mine. In fact, a lot of times you do put them in that just to get, you know, organs out of the way. So I don't know necessarily if I believe that, but I mean, if you look at his reviews and you talk to his other patients, they're happy. So, but
what about the ones that are no longer here?
And that is the thing. You know, there's no way of knowing. Well, you know, you can't go to a place, you can't go online and check out somebody that way. You know, the hospitals keep that stuff real hush hush. If they toss your credentials, they're not telling everybody and letting people know. There's no.
But what about the state board? I mean, aren't there some things that are public information?
I think so, yes. But I mean, I've researched this guy a long time before I decided to use him. Luckily, mine went fine.
Yeah. I'm just saying, shoot something off to the AMA real quick. You know, hey, is this guy legit?
Is this guy okay?
I think it's one of those things. Again, it's you know, do a good job on the ones that can write a Yelp review or whatever, or you know, Google rate you, and the other ones kill. You know, that way.
Enough.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, you know, that
enough. No. I'm gonna talk now.
Okay. All right.
I couldn't disagree with you guys more. I don't think this guy did this on purpose. I think. Oh,
well,
you did.
I think that's how you feel.
I think that he is one of the Dr. Johnson types that just believes in himself so much, and that everything that he does is 1,000. The hiccuping is just completely detracting from
I know, but you should see a doctor about that.
Or do like that one guy and set yourself on fire. It cured hiccups.
Anyway, I believe this dude genuinely thought he was that good. And it wasn't setting out to deliberately hurt these people. He was doing it.
I hear where you're coming from, and remember when I mentioned the fact that I thought this guy was a sociopath. That is not a person that is going to admit to something wrong. And therefore it's not deliberate from the standpoint of what he's thinking mentally, but it is deliberate because of his actions and then denying them.
Going. Yeah, he kept going and going. Like if you knew that you're doing horrible and you keep going and you keep hurting people, you think you would stop, but he didn't. Like you think that you could say that you're the best that ever was, and then you go in and you maim a few people, you're going to go, maybe I'm not. But he held true to this, I'm the best. I know what I'm doing. And
but you're not taking into account the narcissistic justifications.
Okay, well, I was.
Because in college, you know, it was never his fault that he was bad at football. It was always the wind or someone throwing him a bad toss or whatever. He just really thought it was somebody else's fault.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, you have people within the OR that have seen these procedures a million times saying, I could see what he was doing and it was horribly wrong. Like I could perform the surgery better than this guy.
Yeah, but it wasn't his fault. It was the surgical tech for handing him the wrong equipment. It was
I'm sorry, your hiccups and everything. I understand what you're getting at. And let me just say one thing here. Let's put this in a different perspective. There are many people, and this is just my view as being in law enforcement. You have a situation where you have someone who's, let's say, mentally insane or mentally insane, and he kills his family, and they send him to a state hospital, let's say, and he's cured, and they have medical meds that they give him, right? So what do? They release him because it wasn't his fault. It was the fact that he was criminally insane, and he went in on that plea, right? So they put him in the hospital. He gets his meds, whatever, and a few years later, he's back out on the street, and then he kills somebody. There comes a point in society where we have to determine that it's not the motive. It's not the motive. It's the fact that we have to protect society. That's the key issue. It doesn't matter the reason why society is being hurt. It doesn't matter the reason that this one doctor is killing all these patients and maiming other patients. The point is he has to be stopped. Regardless of his modus operandi, he has got to be stopped. And that's where I'm coming from.
I agree, Phil. This dude had to be stopped. Absolutely, he deserves to be in jail. Absolutely. I'm just saying, I don't think that he was like a serial killer or, someone who was doing this on purpose.
Well, I think killers are that way too, though.
No.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah.
No.
I would like to hear from Chubbs, who's been very quiet through most of it.
Hi, Chubbs.
Well, I can just say that one, having had multiple back surgeries and one gone wrong, you go in signing a paper, and if you read it, it says that things can go wrong. And for me, it was my last one was my third surgery, and it was one of those odd things where things that could go wrong did go wrong. But my surgeon actually is a good surgeon. He did fine the other times. This was just a weird thing. But when I was looking into this story, the one about Nikki had mentioned, like the guy with the sponge in his throat, it seems like everybody said the doctor, Dr. Death there, like kept telling everybody, no, this is the way to do it. So I think in like maybe retrospect, like a lot of things he were doing, it's, he was drugged up sometimes, but I think he thought he was right. And maybe people didn't want to step in and say, hey, I'm going to correct the doctor on this one, right. Except for that one story you said, like somebody jumped in, but maybe he was a little crazy or something, but I don't think he was going in, I'm going to hurt this person. I think he was just like, no, I'm going to do this. This is right. And it wasn't right. And one person I saw after he was sent to prison for life said they don't care about the money or anything. They're just glad they can get him away so it won't happen again. And I think that's the best part, is he won't hurt anybody again.
Yeah, and as someone that does surgical technology, that's something, it's a fine line that we have to go on as to whether or not we say something to a surgeon or we say something to a charge nurse about the behavior of the doctor. When you're in school, they tell you, yes, if the doctor looks like he's under the influence, if he's doing blah, 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 go to your charge nurse and file a report. On the next instance, it's such a small community. So if you go in and you're like, Dr. So-and-so did such and such, you can be blacklisted from your entire state very, very quickly. So it's a weird line. I mean, it's other people's responsibilities as well. You had circulators and first assists and a bunch of other people that knew that under no circumstances are you supposed to leave a surgical sponge inside somebody's throat. We count those for a reason, before and during and after the surgery. Like sometimes 3-4 times during a surgery, we count to make sure we have them all. They knew there was no reason to have that, and still no one said anything. So part of it is just the fact that as a culture, the medical culture enables and kind of spoils surgeons. Nobody wanted to say anything.
I think that's true of any specialized, highly specialized industry where there's a small amount of people who do that. I mean, for example, if you are, in intelligence gathering or surgeons or whatever it is, a lot of that's going to be, I'm going to look at that and say, I would have done it this way. I would have done it that way. And then at the time you basically have to say, I think his intent was to do that, or I don't think his intent was to do that. And if you have a doubt and you speak to the other person about it, and then they say, no, that's not what I intended, then you go by what they say. In other words, that's one of those things you're not going to try to become a, whistleblower on somebody else, because of the fact that if you get this wrong, or even if you're right sometimes, that's it. You're done. You might as well just say, okay, the last, 25 years of my life, just flush that down a toilet. And so that's part of the issue that you have, because of the fact that you can't. So this is why everybody says, well, why are these always these conspiracies of thought to silence? And that's why. It's because you live in a group, you live in a group where if you see something that's generally wrong, it's very hard to say that you saw something that's wrong. And I think that's what's happening here too, is that, unless it's blatantly, because how that goes. I mean, whenever if you call somebody onto the carpet, then the next thing you know is that person's going to be attacking you, saying you've done this wrong and you've done that wrong. And he's going to have representations looking up your butt and everything like that. And so not only does it possibly ruin his life, it also is going to ruin your life. And so, it's kind of like that whole Chinese proverb, if you go out looking for revenge, dig 2 graves, it's basically the same thing. You're basically killing yourself.
Yeah. Well, this guy should have realized that after his third death, that maybe he should have cut his losses and gone to work at the Donner food truck up in the national forest.
Yeah, but what I'm saying with that is that there are certain jobs for certain people. And in other words, if I think I'm the best shoe salesman in the world, does it hurt anybody if I'm wrong? No.
Yeah, but it's different pathology. Phil said that serial killers don't know what they're doing is wrong. Of course they know what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah,
That's why they work so hard not to be caught. I'm telling you, you get to that level of narcissism, that level of self-indulgence, you got no idea. Like Jim Jones, the dude that was leading Heaven's Gate, this guy, Matthew Johnson, these people, they've got no idea what they're doing is wrong, because they've just reached that level in their consciousness where they're like, I'm right, everyone else is a moron. They don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And I believe with 1000% of my essence that based on what I've read, what I've watched, this dude genuinely didn't think what he was doing was wrong, and therefore would never stop until the medical board intervened. And they did the right thing. This dude deserved to be in jail. Absolutely. This dude deserved to lose his medical license. Everything you said is correct. It's just the motive. You know what I mean?
Right.
The motive. That's
but can I just pick one of those pieces apart?
Yeah, but first I have to correct something, because I did not mean to insinuate that serial killers do not know what they're doing. They in fact do. It's just that they have this desire to feed that desire so badly that they will ignore a lot of things.
Right. And my going along with what Phil says is the difference between the reason that I think that this guy could get away with a lot of it is because of the authority given to him by credentialing service.
Oh, he's God, right?
Right. In other words, as far as not only does he have his own question of whether he's omnipotent and omniscient and the whole different thing, he has a piece of paper on the wall that says basically the same thing. In other words, judged by his spirit, which is a difference between Marshall Applewhite and Jim Jones and Dr. Johnson, because he also has a piece of paper on the wall that says, judged by his peers and the standard of the state, he should know better.
Now, before we end the show, can I just say one thing? We're not insinuating that Dr. Johnson is out killing people.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm using that solely as a representation. I'm making no judgments about it. You can come up with whatever you want to think about that. However, technically, from a standard of authority and other things like that, he should be held to a higher standard than a lay person. That's my opinion.
We're not saying that he's killing people yet. Okay.
Wow.
Oh, this faith healing thing will end with somebody dead.
And with that in mind.
Okay, I'm just saying we're not saying he's killed anyone yet.
And thanks for watching.
I'm just saying.
Before you go, and I wanted to say this because that's awfully sour note. But I do like to say that tomorrow is the solstice, and if you do get onto archaeology.ie, you can see the sunrise at Newgrange, which is now determined to be the world's oldest historic monolith or something. You can see the sunrise go into the chamber tomorrow at archaeology.ie. That's put on by the Irish government.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's just the world's shortest day. I know I will. That'll wrap us up for this week. We will return next week, despite the hopes of many. I want to thank Nikki for doing an excellent job of covering the subject. Well done, Nikki.
Thank you.
Next week will be Boxing Day, not a holiday celebrated by Americans, but I will be in no fit state to host, so I'm relying on my co-host pretty heavily next week. The Chubbs will be talking about The Grunch and Julia Brown, and Phil will be discussing The Mothman.
Ooh.
So tune in next week for those exciting topics. The better half of the Dude Brothers handling two different topics, Chubbs.
Okay, so go over that again. The Grinch?
The Grunch Road.
Oh, the Grunch?
It's a fascinating story. I don't want to give anything away, but
okay. I just wanted to be able to look it up. And then the other one is The Grinch and Downtown Julie Brown. Those are two things we're going to talk about next week.
It's Julia Brown or Julia White, a voodoo priestess from down here, and her story is very, very cool. So
yeah, she worked uptown, not downtown.
Well, and if you were in the early '90s, there were two Julia Browns on MTV.
Yes. It was Julie Brown.
Julie Brown. Yeah, Julie Brown. Okay.
Downtown, yeah.
Are you done, Kevin? Because you got your topic last week of the Shanghai tournament. So no, I don't know why you're being so mean right now.
I wasn't being mean. I was trying to understand.
It feels like you're just being really mean about this whole thing. Chubb's having his own topic.
Let me say one thing as we go on. Chubbsy's the best.
Yeah, he is.
Richard is trying to stir the pot, and then he's gonna drop it off and say disco sucks. And I'm gonna have to sit here for another week saying nothing.
Yeah, man. No, whatever. I mean, you like disco? That's on you. As far as I'm
That's why they called it Donner Party Disco.
No one ever
not here.
They'd rather eat each other than listen to disco.
Exactly.
Should have played.
Cannibalism is preferable to disco. I like that. That's a good way to end this. Disco sucks.